Hey guys, welcome back to the Immigrant Unfiltered podcast with Hamza Ali. I'm your host. Today I have a dear friend, Nicolaus Radford. He's the founder and CEO of Nauticus. But more importantly, he's a friend of mine that I met through a group that I'm a part of. And he does some amazing things. In my mind, when I first met him, I actually called him in my mind. So he doesn't know this. He's going to find this out just now. I called him the Iron Man of water. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But before we do, Nick, please give us a brief intro. And by brief, I mean make it as detailed as possible because you do some really cool things that I'm sure our audience wants to hear about.
Wow, that was too kind, obviously, and I remember, honestly, I remember meeting you for the first time, and that whole group we're part of is just crazy inspirational. But your energy is just huge, and you're just fun to be around. You're fun to listen to. Right. You know, whenever you're talking, everybody just is just like so laser focused on what's going on with you. So, and myself equally. It was just it's so awesome listening to your exploits and how successful everything's becoming. So congrats to you as well.
Thank you.
But my journey kind of moves around a little bit. I spent, like the first defining moment of my career was spending those first 15 years at NASA, and I was very fortunate enough to work with just some of the best and brightest people anyone could just ever hope to be around. And it's sort of just like you sort of are thinking introspectively, like, man, I got to up my game.
Yeah.
These guys are really effing smart. and I was in the robotics group, and so we developed humanoid robotics. You know, robots that sort of look like you and me, and they have two arms and a head, and they sort of walk or they float. And I left leading that group at the Johnson Space Center, developing just some crazy stuff. We're trying to think about how we're going to have robots head to Mars and build habitats with the astronauts. And so we've studied how to get to Mars and how robots and humans would have some interplay and how they would coordinate. And flew examples of these devices to the space station. Just awesome. Just an awesome time. Very influential. Some of the stuff that I worked on, Robonaut was flown to the space station, ended up on Saturday Night Live. It was parodied by The Weeknd with Seth, and I need to say Seth's last name because it acts like he's my friend.
Yeah.
But he's not my friend, right? You know, Seth and his Weekend wrap up or whatever the hell it's called. But it's just hilarious, right? And so it's you know, they're doing this thing like, you know, NASA flies this robot to the space station. NASA puts out this press release. It was heralded as one of these awesome days, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you know, and the robots put out a press release and called it Phase 1. And, you know, that was hilarious. And it's just, it was a really influential part of my life for sure. But then, I don't know if you know this or not, but you don't make any money in the government.
I actually did not know that.
Thankfully, right?
I thought that's where all the money is.
Right, yeah. No matter how, you pay a lot of taxes for sure, and yes, it gets sort of sucked off into the ether. But thankfully, a lot of folks in government don't get stupid wealthy and rich, and you know, they make a good living for sure. And a lot of government agencies, they sort of they really depend on that mission part to make up for the financial component, right?
Yeah. So is that how they keep them in?
Absolutely,
okay.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. You kind of like, you know, God and country, and you feel like you're making a difference. And NASA is definitely all part of that. And, you know, and in fact, in some of the employment principles, right, you can, you know, it's mission, culture, and pay. Yeah. As an employer, you know, as you completely understand, you can take one of those away from somebody.
Right.
Right? You know, if you want to save the whales and you love working with your friends, you don't care that you're paid shit, right? But as soon as you don't like the whales or you can't stand your friends, you'll quit, right? Yeah. And so the government is really good at going, listen, you make okay money, you know, you can, nice house, 2.3 kids, whatever. But the mission and usually the culture of the agency you're working at is exceptional. And NASA ranked way up there. It's usually one of the best places you could work all throughout any of the place in the government. And you receive such a tremendous education. And so I became aware, you know, Houston, energy capital of the world. So there's a lot of offshore influence. And as we were doing things at NASA, we would get a lot of visitors from energy companies all the way to whoever. Invariably, somebody would say, have you ever thought about taking this cool ass space tech underwater? And the first couple times you hear it, you're like, you dismiss it.
Yeah.
You're like, listen, bro, I'm putting shit on the moon. Okay. don't distract me with your ocean nonsense or whatever. Right. And I don't know, something happened. You hear it a couple of different times. I befriended some people in the energy community, and they said, no, seriously, do you have any idea what goes on underwater? And you don't think about it. Even though it's responsible for the electricity likely coming into this house, right? The
internet.
The internet thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cabling.
99.5% of all data traveled around the world goes through ocean cables.
Right.
Right. The sustenance, the food that you eat, right? We extract from the ocean. I mean, here's the good news, bad news, right? So world poverty's going down. Hooray. But the first thing that people with more disposable income do is they put more protein into their diet. First protein they turn to is fish.
Mm-hmm.
And if we continue fishing the world's oceans at the present rate, we will overfish them in the next 40 years, deplete them of all the usable stores of fish. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So, but the ocean is this tremendous economy, multi-trillion-dollar economy, and sort of been laggard in innovation. Not really been, it's responsible for so much, but yet gets so little attention. Yeah. It's very difficult to develop anything.
I would think I know more about space than I do about the ocean.
You absolutely do. In fact, so does all the NASA scientists. We know more about this, and this is kind of cliche to say, but it's absolutely true. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the surface or the seabed of our oceans.
Yeah,
100% without a doubt. And you know how there's like no worse critic on a smoker than an ex-smoker?
Right.
Having worked at NASA, I might be a little critical of some of their plans. Listen, I want to go to Mars too. I think it's going to be awesome. But I also think if we do it in the next 200 years, that's probably okay as well. And there's a lot of pressing things that we could concern ourselves that have to do with the ocean space, the inner space instead of outer space. So I decided to dedicate the next 15 years of whatever epic of my career. I have this thing, I want to live 5 lifetimes before I die.
Okay.
And so every 7 years, you need to sort of molt, reinvent yourself. And even though I did 15 years at NASA, it sounds like I got out of prison. I did 15 years. I was in for 15, right? I did 15 years at NASA. I sort of had so very fundamentally different jobs. That it's like you can see 2 different epics, like this first 7 years, the second 7 years. And so I've just decided to dedicate all of my available time, resource, energy, money to exploring, expanding a business that can make an appreciable difference in the ocean economy.
Yeah.
And that is a long-ass introduction.
Yeah, that is, but it's a good one. And look, it's detailed enough to where people now understand, what you're all about and why I think you're the, underwater Iron Man, basically. How'd you get started in NASA?
I think I was just lucky as hell.
How does one even do that? Like what, do I land on, land into Clear Lake, go with my application? Like what?
That's one way. You'll probably end up at Space Center Houston as a greeter. But I have a friend of mine, and she was trying to get into NASA for a very long time, and so she decided to go work at Space Center Houston, trying to get as close to the Space Center. And I was like, it's not quite the same thing,
right?
But I studied engineering in college, and I went to Purdue University, which is a little helpful because it's the home of the astronauts. Right. So everything, you're just inundated with NASA, everything.
Yeah, you're infused in that culture almost.
You're saturated with it. You're just soaking with it, right? And, I had little pinups of space shuttles. And I grew up in the 80s.
Right.
Come on.
Space is where it's at.
Oh, space is
that was everything.
Space Camp.
Yeah.
Flight of the Navigator. Are you kidding me? One of the greatest movies of all time. Compliance, right? It's just an amazing movie. And so just like every kid, I was infected with sort of that space feeling, space bug. Did I ever feel that I would ever step foot at NASA? No, I never did. It was like... that I did not have an upbringing where that sort of trajectory was even remotely in the cards.
Okay.
You know, it was, I don't know. Gosh, I look back on my life, I'm like, I was like one of the luckiest people to take the path that I did. There's no reason I should have turned out this way. My parents were incredible, right? Both didn't go to college. I was the first person on my paternal side to go to college. So it wasn't just sort of, you know,
Right.
we're not talking private money, you know, private school money here
Right.
from the Northeast or whatever, right? We're talking rural Indiana.
Yeah.
And, but somehow I was good in athletics and ended up on the track team at Purdue. And I was studying engineering, which became very difficult to do both, by the way. I don't know how people in athletics, collegiate athletics, do it because it's another full-time job.
Right.
And I was like, listen, I'm not going to be on the cover of Wheaties. You know, I'm not going to make the Olympic team here. Should probably focus on what the next, I don't know, 45 years of my life looks like as opposed to the next 3, trying to be some sort of impression of Dan and Dan.
Right.
You know, I was actually a decathlete, So NASA was recruiting one day. I started as and I just put in my application and got hooked up with a contractor first.
Okay.
I was not in the co-op program. NASA typically hires through co-ops, interns, right? I was not. I didn't have the grades for that, by the way. That's another thing we should get into. At some point.
Let's talk about that.
Horrible fucking student.
Okay, like how bad? Because
Like,
I was horrible too.
really, no.
So we need to compare.
Yeah, so bad that I would never publicly admit it, ever what my GPA was. But let's just say that when I went through the contractor ranks and then I was asked to be a federal civil servant at NASA, they had to make an exception.
Okay. All right.
They were like, we don't hire people with this low of a GPA. Like, is this a mistake? Like, did you have the decimal place in the wrong spot?
All right.
Is this number, if like, look at the number upside down, might be the number we might accept, but this is the right side up. So I don't know what's going on here. And my manager at the time, he's like, I had to submit my transcripts. They brought me in. They were like, really? I'm like, yeah, I know. It was a really hard time.
Yeah.
And I just found so many other things to do in college. I couldn't take tests. It was terrible. But here was the disconnect. I was in charge of everything, right? People looked at me like, okay, you know, what are we going to do? And I was a designer, and I had flown stuff to space, and I built robots. And so when NASA was coming to hire me direct as a civil servant, they were literally like, okay, we know what you've done, but we see your academic credentials, and the two are not aligning.
Right.
I'm like, listen, you know, didn't you have some bad days too? You know? Yeah, but not 4 years of bad days. And I'm like, listen, I can't take tests. So they hired me anyway, and you know, it was pretty good on their part. And but so you get into NASA one of a couple different ways. You can intern there, co-op. You come up through the ranks that way. They typically only hire that way. So there's, I don't know, 4,000 civil servants at JSC, another maybe 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 contractors. They hire 2, 3 people a year.
Yeah, very selective.
Very selective through this sort of professional way in. They take a bunch of interns and co-ops and they convert them to full-times,
Right.
Probably hundreds, I don't know the exact numbers. But they hire a handful of people a year, and sometimes they don't hire anybody. And 1 year, it took me, once I said I want to, you know, they offer you, they sort of say, hey, listen, we're sort of, you're on the short list to become a civil servant. And you're like, ooh, right? That was 3 years it took.
From the initial conversation.
From the initial conversation to actually getting hired. That's how long of a process it is and how hard it is to become a civil servant. Which, when I decided to then tell my boss I was leaving, he was unhappy.
The contractor at the time.
No. When I was a Fed.
Okay.
And then you know, and I'm doing my job, blah, blah, blah. And I, you know, did that for a long time. But this guy had to move heaven and earth to hire me. We then got hooked up with a bunch of, we were working with a bunch of other agencies that work with NASA. And I was selected to be part of that as well.
Right.
You know, screw you, GPA. And so I got selected to be part of this very elite group of engineers helping other agencies solve very hard problems.
Yeah. Now, when you say other agencies, you mean like like what are you talking about here? I feel like that's code for like stuff I'm not supposed to know.
You know, it's there's so NASA does a lot of good work, and let's just say that those specialized skills. Let's just we need to develop a robot, put it somewhere, have it do something. Those skills are just not in everyday agencies.
Right.
So sometimes they come to NASA and then knock on NASA's door and they'd be like, "Do you guys know how to figure this out?"
Yeah.
And we're scratch our head and we're like, "I don't know." And so there was a group of us that got selected to help other agencies solve challenging problems.
Got it.
Just think like, you know, intelligence community
Yeah.
folks, or
Yeah.
people that are trying to do stuff somewhere and they need some help. And I was able to get, you know, a very high security clearance and work with those groups, which almost kept me at NASA. Like you and I were talking before we started the show, the mission,
Yeah.
you know, and to continue on that when we were talking that second
So
ago.
it must, talking about, sorry to cut you off, it must have actually been hard on you to leave.
Oh, it was very hard.
Like
was
just
very
because
hard.
I feel like that's such a culture that's
Oh, it
drilled into
is.
you.
No,
that even just leaving, I bet there was like, you know, there were feelings there.
very much so. And you know, 15 years, a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. And because you get so bought into the mission, and there was the core NASA mission, and then there was the other things we were doing. And let me just tell you, when you sort of learn how the world works and you kind of get into that sphere where you're learning about that stuff, you're just like, geez.
Yeah.
But it's intoxicating. It's something that you just are drawn into, and you will make shit money forever because it's just so compelling to know this stuff and to work on this stuff. And yeah, so it was very difficult because the government had invested a lot of money bringing me up to this level. And I went to my dad, and I told my dad I didn't want the family farm, my boss, and he was, I mean, extremely upset to the point where there were legal issues, and you know, things we could talk offline about. But yeah, it was a big deal. It was huge. They were pissed, and then I got pissed, and so I hired 25 people away from NASA. I don't get Christmas cards from NASA anymore.
Damn. How does one jump from I can't leave this, I know too much, or you know, I have access to all this information, and if I leave tomorrow, I lose all of it. Not only that, but then go on to founding, like, how many businesses have you founded since?
3.
Yeah, so go on to founding 3 different businesses.
All very extremely different
Right.
companies.
And so how does that even happen? Because at that point, I'm assuming you were, in my mind, when I think about it, you're scientist mode. You're like,
oh yeah, very much.
you're going, you know, you're going, and now you're an entrepreneur. And usually, like, you know, that it's not a flip of a switch.
So I'm very purposeful in everything that I do, and when I actually quit, I had been planning to quit for probably 2 years.
Okay.
And I said, if I'm going to capitalize on the next phase of my life, I need to start prepping not only the relationships. So a lot of the people that I were working with at NASA, as I left, I'm still working with, right? And so I started prepping all these relationships. I started sort of networking like on steroids. And I started planning how I was going to leave the government. And I think everyone needs to really consider, if life happens to you by chance, you're probably doing something wrong. Now, you can get lucky. And there are times in my life I got extremely lucky. But then you need to recognize that luck, capitalize on it, and not waste it. And the way I do everything in my life is I'm extremely methodical and calculating. And so, with no exception, one of the biggest moves in my life that I was going to make was well thought out and planned. And I knew that what we had developed in space, I think, would have long-term value to the ocean economy. And I chose to build a technology business, which is very different than people can build very just starkly different companies, right? You can bootstrap it, save up a little bit, buy a little morsel, then compound it up, right? Organic growth. or you can have an idea that's going to take more money than you can probably scrape together over the next 5 years to make a step change in an industry.
Yeah.
And develop something that no one's got the stomach to do, organize a whole coalition of the willing that are going to continue to write tens of millions of dollars of checks over a very long period of time, and to then increment and show that progress, and then come out on the other end with something of tremendous value that has to even still be commercialized. But people can see, holy shit. And to even follow that, you're $100 million behind this person. And it's almost discourages someone from even trying to compete with you. And our business, we're going up against multi-billion-dollar companies, of which I have tremendous respect for, all of them. They all have incredible businesses. And I tell people still that I'm building I have a company, but I don't have a business yet, right? Technology companies, they start, like you're titrating that little beaker in high school chemistry class. You know, it's like you're putting those little drops in, the thing's swirling and it's still white, and you drop, and on your 49th drop and on your 50th drop, it swirls pink. You have that tipping point. And that concept is so real in a technology startup company, because you're just going to pour so much effort, money, resources, human capital into all of this, and it's going to hit a critical mass, and you're going to have a tipping point, and then you're really going to have that acceleration. And that's exactly the stage of the company's in right now. We have, in about a 7-year period of time, I've probably raised $150 million for this particular effort. And, my career overall, I've probably raised upwards of, 240, 250. And so,
for different efforts.
For different efforts, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And these are all technology development, or the fund is a little different in trading electricity.
Right.
But we're going against multi-billion-dollar companies that have extremely deep pockets, and I think they're finding it a little hard to follow our pace.
Because you're the founder. You're running the company, and generally founders who run companies just have a different desire, different passion, different fire, and
different risk tolerance.
Yeah, and different risk tolerance.
This is the most defining moment. I think I see it in you all the time. But your appetite for risk is very high.
Yes,
it's very high.
It is,
and mine as well. I can walk on that line and feel very certain about how the path's going to turn out, where other people around me be like, holy shit, you know what's coming up? Look what's going to happen. And I'm like, I know. And I know this is how we're going to get through it. So just calm the fuck down.
Yeah. Yeah, I go through those every day. Every day in my office is a battle. Mm-hmm. And it's a battle that, ultimately I have to win somehow. Mm-hmm. And this is not even the war, this is just a battle. And this is a daily battle. And you're right. It's all risk reward. The higher the risk, the higher the reward. Sometimes I feel like the mission is not money. Like I feel that NASA culture is almost something that after a certain point in time kind of catches up to you. Mm-hmm. Where I look at you, I don't think your passion is money. To be truly honest, I feel like you have other desires and other reasons for going after this so hard.
Money's a really convenient byproduct
right.
of doing a good job. And good is defined as real tremendous market value. And my employees and the people that I have partners, their products are the things we're developing and the services we're putting out in the world. My product is the company. And that becomes something that you can center your whole energy around. And that company can be directed to handle a lot of different themes. But at the end of the day, my product is the company, and I take it exceptionally seriously, very seriously.
Yeah. So, you left NASA. Just going to backtrack a little bit so that the audience knows where we're at. You founded 3 companies. Mm-hmm. It's not one company. So obviously you have the company that you took public. We'll talk about that in a second. But you founded 3 different companies. Mm-hmm. What is the timeline?
So I started Nauticus in 2014 and took my first little bit of investment in 2015, took a little bit more investment in 2018. And then during the 2018 round, My graduate work was in variable flux electric machine optimization. I know a kid that didn't have a GPA to even shake a stick at, then goes on to grad school, dealing with electric motors and optimizing them and working in the field of variable flux. And it's a very compelling piece of IP. And so I took that out of the first company and raised a whole nother set of funding rounds around that. And that's been going very, very, very well right now. So as an aside, the world has a rare earth material problem. North of 90 some odd percent, some estimates as high as 98, depending on where you draw the dotted lines around refining and the raw materials and how it's processed and the actual end product is shipped. But China owns probably, or controls rather, 98% of the world's rare earth mineral supply and magnets. And the world's needing a lot of those minerals and materials right now as we build electric cars, batteries, and especially the magnets that generate the electricity or consume the electricity for propulsion. So rare earth magnets are a huge issue.
Do you feel like that's just because we haven't found it anywhere else just yet, or is that just the way it's going to be?
Funny enough, the world has some interesting deposits of rare earth material all over the place. But China has structured the processing of this where it's all roads lead through China somehow. Now, the U.S. could probably create some independent aspects, but it's going to be really costly, really hard. I mean, the irony is rare earth material is actually pretty plentiful. It's just hard to create into the things that we need it to. So an electric motor that I was working on is displacing rare earth material, and it doesn't use any rare earth magnets. Has the same performance as a rare earth machine. It's higher efficiency, and I think electric cars are probably going to be a big deal. And so I spun this company out. It's called Jacobi, named after one of the old physicists back in the day. Because apparently that's really popular to name a company after some, physicists. And but Jacobi has the place in history of having developed the world's first rotating electric motor, in the 1834 timeframe, and came up with the maximum power transfer theorem, which is kind of like what we're doing with Jacobi. And the electric motor is going to be a big deal.
Is this the same motor you're going to use in your other companies? Is there a synergy there?
There is, and yes.
Okay. Well, that's all we can get out of it.
Yeah. So then it turns out that electricity is used a lot of places.
Right.
Who knew? And the renewable impact of the grid and the conventional grid, they're sort of colliding right now. So you have wind congestion. Wind is heavily subsidized, and the conventional grid for reliability, and they just fight each other. And that creates some very profitable trading dynamics.
Okay, so there's like arbitrage opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I am, don't want to give too much this away, but there's fixed transmissions rights of how electricity is traded around, and we're in 4 North American power markets.
Yeah. And now is probably the best time. I mean, as things become more efficient on one end and less efficient on the other, you're probably in.
And there's handoffs between the grid and their challenges. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow, and sometimes you want electricity. Sometimes the wind blows too much, and you got to offload it. And where do you put it, right? We don't have enough battery storage on the grid right now.
Right.
And so there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
So so Nauticus, Jacobi, and Rad Capital Ventures.
Okay. And so let's talk about Nauticus now. So initially when we met, you were speaking of taking the company public, which then you did via SPAC.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure our audience is curious as to how does one actually get into a place where they get to take what is that opportunity like?
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
So the history of the company during that time, we actually had an acquisition offer on the company, and I was curious how market that acquisition offer was. And so working with some banking institutions and a banker,
What was the valuation? Could you share?
Yeah. We got so if you pre-money valuation on the company was about 300 million, and so then if you look at cash, so the deal was valued about 600 million, all in.
Okay.
So something that you go, okay, I'm interested.
Yeah.
I'm listening. And so, there's a lot of different, so why, right? I wasn't terribly just dead set on, okay, I have to have a public company, but being a public company allows you certain flexibilities. And especially with a lot of the clients that I deal with, which are other large public companies, the staying power of a public company gives them a little bit more comfort that you're going to be here next year. So the offshore industry that I work in is usually dominated by a very like the payers of that industry. They're huge corporations that don't exactly want to invest the time, the energy of bringing new tech to market if they think the company isn't going to be here in 6 months. And a private company, with the way you attract funding and how hard it is to commercialize ocean technology, which is very difficult to do and it's very expensive. Having a public-facing posture increases our staying power in the eyes of these other companies, which are our clients.
Right, and they want to invest.
Yeah, and so yes, they like the fact that the company is more stable now, and we have a product. It's called the Fleet, and that product is comprised of an autonomous surface vessel. It's about 18 meters long. And that autonomous surface vessel is optionally crewed. For the first 2 years, we'll have a crew of 4 on it. And it drops off an autonomous underwater robot called Aquanaut. So a Hydronaut and Aquanaut. That pair costs us about $8 million to build. But bills out at $8 million a year.
Yeah.
So we're building a fleet. And, we've built a couple. We have them coming off the assembly line right now. My manufacturing is done in Vancouver. For the Aquanaut, and the boats are built in a shipyard in the UK, in Southampton. And so we're building about $40 million worth of capital equipment at the moment. And as a private company, it's a little harder to get financed. It's a nice investment. What's the word I want to find? It's like a bankable idea. Hey,
Right.
this thing I'm going to build for $8 million, I make $8 million a year on.
Mm-hmm.
Help me build 5,
Yeah.
right? Five sets. And they're like, okay, I see that, right? It has a good ROI on it, has a good, return for the capital you invest. And it's built on top of, not only a spaceflight robotics portfolio that was probably valued at a couple $100 million, but $100 million of honest to goodness, real hard investment that's gone into it. And these are concepts which are non-trivial. The artificial intelligence that these robots are running, their ability to adapt to real world changes and dynamics of doing work underwater, actually intervening, dealing with the seabed, the water column, and doing it in the context of very little information exchange between the operator and the robot. That is not something that you just go, oh, yeah, I'll just put this in there next week, right? It's taken us years to develop, and therefore, this concept, in my opinion, is going to displace a lot of how things are done today.
So, give me an example. Like, what type of work are they doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I saw the video, and it seems like they have arms and they can twist and turn things. But what type of work are these robots meant to do, or where are they going in the future?
Yep. So the ocean economies, if you think of oil and gas, offshore renewables like wind, tidal, fisheries, mining, telecommunications, and then obviously you have the more of the government-oriented markets, maybe ports, defense, intel, infrastructure security, which is a huge topic right now. Obviously with the war in Ukraine, there's Nord Stream pipeline, that little funny thing happened here recently. Infrastructure security is a big deal. And a lot of countries are now going, holy cow, how exposed are we? And if you look at the taxonomy of robot things that are out there right now. And I don't even call them robotic. There's a whole class that's more like heavy construction equipment, what they call a remotely operated vehicle. So you take a big ship. This ship's like, I don't know, 100 meters long, you know, the size of a football pitch. And got 60 people on board. And you want to affect things in the underwater, right? You want to cut something. You want to plug something in. There's a lot of tooling. Got to clean a lot of stuff. There's a multi-trillion-dollar installed infrastructure of things in the ocean. Think of every oil and gas installation all the way to an offshore wind farm that's buried in the sea, to all the port security, or to all the port and harbor infrastructure. Like, it's just a ton of stuff that you've installed, that the world has installed. And when you put something in seawater, it starts corroding.
Yeah.
And you want to measure that corrosion. You know, when am I going to have to replace this? Is it going to fall over? And then you look at a lot of the oil and gas infrastructure where there's actual valves that need to be adjusted in position, because there are these manifolds that are adjusting the hydrocarbon flow. And then you have nets from offshore. So you remember when we were talking about, you know, if we keep fishing the world at the rate we are, we're going to deplete the usable source of fish in 40 years. So now you're seeing an exponential boom of sustainable fish farms. And would you have it that if you want to clean the nets of these fish farms, you take out a gigantic ROV vessel, you drop this ROV off the side of it, and you're cleaning, counting fish. These vessels are $100,000, $150,000 a day to operate, because if so many people, the boat's enormous, and it has the world's largest extension cord to drive that little, you know, heavy construction equipment piece down there.
Yeah.
3 miles underwater.
Yeah. And the extension cord is doing what?
It's just power and data.
Data.
Fiber optic data up to some monitors on a boat and a dude with some joysticks. It's like, and there's several people running the same device. It's literally like watching using a Ouija board to do brain surgery. There's one guy's running one arm, another guy's running another arm. There's another dude flying the body around. They're talking about what they had for breakfast, right? And this operation is $3 a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So we said, okay, let's get rid of the umbilical. You know, we came from NASA. We understand networking in very sparse data environments. We probably don't need an umbilical. If you don't need an umbilical, maybe you don't need a ship as big. Maybe you don't need all the infrastructure. Maybe you have a robot that can swim really far on its own and deploy some arms. And then you start just tearing down everything that makes it really expensive. Maybe you operate it on shore in your office with a laptop. Why do I got to deploy somebody to look at some monitors with a joystick? This is the 21st century, my God. And you repackage that into something that we bill out at $40,000 a day at a 70% margin. So now we compete. So now we're next best alternative pricing, because we would never do $40,000 or $50,000 a day because it doesn't cost that much, right? But the next best alternative is $125,000 a day. You can use us at 40, or you can use dude over there for 125. And they go, no, hang on a second. Let's keep talking. And it turns out it's a profitable business for the actual thing. Now, getting it up and going, right? We're in the startup cost, build the assembly line, manufacture the devices, get them into the world. We've had some pre-production units that are out in the wild now. And so we said, okay, things are working well. We're going to base an entire company's arc on this. Let's raise some money. Let's manufacture a bunch, which we call the fleet. And that's what the company's doing. So in that way, let's say you're going to have some creative finance, or not, I wouldn't say creative. You're going to have some, financing techniques that might be hard for a private company to obtain. This is a capital-intense business. There's no doubt it will take financing, and that aspects of that are just better handled as a public company.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that as a public company you could get easier or, I guess more creative financing depending on what the business is.
Well, you have a liquid currency now.
Right.
So as a private company, let's say you have an investor come in and they're wondering, okay, in 5 years, you guys might have an exit, or you might have a new investor come in I could see an exit on. As a public company, you can be in and out, right? You can be like, oh, I want to invest in this company for the next 6 months. I want to take them to the next stage, and I want to get my money out. And so there's more liquidity opportunities. Now, I always would like to bring in investors that are long for what we're doing. What we are doing is not going to happen overnight. I'm building a company that has a trajectory which will be much bigger than this. And, we're not even close to finished.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for people that are saying, it's funny. I wrote my first shareholder letter the other day. And,
Because your company's still fairly new.
Oh, it's
public.
very, yeah. We've only been public for 9 months.
Yeah. So
and
just in time.
Yeah. 9 months. Yeah. 7
For
months.
for the letter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're having our first shareholder meeting in May. And I had to write my first shareholder letter. Since we listed, the stock's a little down.
Yeah, well, the market's not been it's a timing thing.
It is. We were talking about that
Yeah.
earlier, right?
Yeah.
Timing's terrible. So, I did some studying on how to voice and write the letter, and it turns out in Amazon's life, Bezos had to write a couple letters where he had an 80% drawdown. He had two 80% drawdowns and one 90% drawdown, and I really reflected on that. And I think this is important for everyone, especially an entrepreneur that has got to just keep putting one foot in front of the other one. And I know you can appreciate this point. But your stock's not always going to go up, turns out. And you're going to have an 80% drawdown day one of these times. How you respond in that moment to having an 80% drawdown will make or break what your trajectory is going to be. It is the critical aspect, because it is just not all going to be rainbows and butterflies and roses if you're going to create anything of any compelling value. And you will be hit with an 80% moment in your life. How do you respond to that moment? How do you just find that tenacious tenacity to be so convicted about what you're doing? And I read his shareholder letters. I went through all of Bezos' shareholder letters. And I came across the one where he just, had a horrible, horrible year. Stock was down 80%. And then first word of his letter is, ouch. And he was known for just plain speak, transparent. Here's how it is.
Yeah.
We're building a fantastic company. I can't help being thrown out with the market. The company's in such a better position than it was a year ago. He explains this in his letter. And you can just hear the resolve in that man's tone. And I reflected on that, what that meant for us. And I was inspired by that. And I think it's so important because people, you've got that grit, right? You have that. You know what it's like to just, I know, right? We know a little bit here.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
know,
We
we know how
know
it
the
started.
inside. Yeah,
we know the insides.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think sometimes there's a whole group of people today that want it so now, and they don't understand that layer of just sweat that you got to put in. And the first time their nose comes up against a wet paper bag, they can't even push through it. And I am teaching my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, who is just incredible, and she'll light the world on fire. And I cannot wait to watch it. And then my son, he's 3. I got really depressed the other day because, you mentioned this Iron Man connection at the beginning. Let me just, I have a dream to be Tony Stark, right?
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna lie, right? I mean, it's kind of just in me, right? And I realized the other day when I was watching my son, how brilliant my son is. He's 3. Every parent thinks their son is like a genius. No, fuck that. My son is a genius, okay? Yeah. I mean, he's just exceptional on every level. It is stupid how smart this kid is. He's fluent in Russian already. And I just went, shit, I'm Tony Stark's dad. I'm not Tony Stark. Fuck, I missed it. My son is going to be Tony Stark. I'm the damn dad. Oh, when I realized that, I was smiling because I'm like, my son is going to make an enormous impact on this planet. And now my job is to equip him with the tools and resources that he can steward and use to compound what I tried. My dad, who came from an exceptionally poor family, very, very poor and things I wouldn't even want to disclose. He had a very hard upbringing, very, very hard upbringing. My dad was working at the age of 13, 14, and my grandfather was taking a cut a very large cut from my dad's check just trying to pay the bills in their house. So he came, large family, small house, very difficult. And, you know, my dad just is in disbelief of what I've been doing. And it's sad. On one hand, it's sad because he doesn't have the mental, like, I love my dad like you wouldn't believe, okay? And I love him for what he's done and where he started and what he's become. But you can just see he could never extend the line, right? He just can't. I remember when I first got my first office space, 2014, November 2014. I'd been working out in my living room, my kitchen, and I'm like, all right, let's get and I got an office space. It's probably for the whole company was smaller than your office here,
Okay.
right? And I got a laptop and I'm paying like $1,100 a month for it. And my dad thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever done. He's like, how are you going to afford $1,100 a month? He's like, I just don't understand. He's like, where are you going to get that money from, right? And, a year, 2 years later, we're now in 7,000 square feet, and we're paying $5,000 a month. He's like, this is the dumbest thing you've ever. You are just lighting money on fire. What are you doing? How are you affording $5,000 a week? Oh my gosh, I don't know. All in, I'm $100,000 a week. A month, sorry, not a week. I'm in a month, and now we're like $100,000 a month.
Yeah.
He just doesn't understand.
Yeah, but you got to do what you got to do to to get to where you want to go.
Exactly, and
specifically, are you guys manufacturing within that facility?
our defense work we do.
Okay.
The things that we do for the Defense Department, we do manufacture down in Clear Lake.
Okay.
Our commercial things, we manufacture in Vancouver, British Columbia. That's been interesting. Doing something across an international border. And we'll see how long. Yes, it's been phenomenal. But the complexities were not as understood at the beginning as what they should have been. We've got them all ironed out.
Okay. And is the complexity bringing them in or border related at all?
Border.
Really?
You're going in and out of customs, right? I mean, you just bringing test equipment across the border can get it locked up for 4 days until they figure out what it is. It's just random. And so we've had to develop quite a cadence to kind of like, we've got a well-oiled machine now. But it hasn't been the simplest thing to figure out. And the boats are, they're being built in the UK. Now boats are kind of boats, right? But a transforming superhuman underwater robot, that's a little different than a boat.
Yeah.
And even though these boats have a lot of autonomous features on them, they're still just a boat. And a robot that's never been built before that is extremely. Outside of a nuclear submarine, this is no lie. Outside of a nuclear submarine, this is probably one of the most complicated, sophisticated devices ever been built and put in the ocean. It's incredible, and I'm convinced it will absolutely alter the ocean industries.
Is that why you have it painted candy red?
No. That actually, I'm a huge Porsche fan.
Oh, okay.
And the Porsche GT3 RS Lava Orange.
Okay, that's what the color is?
Which the color code is Pantone 172C.
Okay.
Yeah, we pulled that and we paint everything Pantone 172C.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted it to be reflective of like a sports car in the ocean.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Branding is huge. Like branding is, like you're a branding god, right? I hope to one day be as good at branding as you are. I'm like a kindergartner when it comes to branding compared to you. But branding is a big deal, and your image and what you project out, how the company views itself is enormously important. And we're building a very advanced piece of technology that enables us to do what we're doing. It needs to be painted a sports car color.
Yeah, I think if you're having so much fun, you might as well include the color that you love most in it, right?
As far as having fun, the reason our stock ticker symbol is KIT is because I was the biggest fan of Knight Rider.
I remember, yeah, we talked about that.
Exactly. And I'm like, if you can't have fun with your stock ticker symbol, you're taking yourself too seriously. Right.
I remember, I think you told me that you were reserving it, or you had just reserved it. I think
I
when
had just reserved
yes.
it. And I was shocked when the NASDAQ came back and said, yeah, that's available. I'm like, no way. How is KIT available? This is stupid. And I'm like, I'll take it. Because I was like, I don't want it to be like NTCS for Nauticus.
Right.
And I thought, so our big product is Aquanaut. I was like, okay, AQNT. That's all just so stupid.
Right.
What is the coolest AI ever?
Yeah, Knight
and
Rider
then
for sure.
Knight Rider for sure.
I wasn't even in this country, and I used to watch Knight Rider back home.
Exactly.
Right?
And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to go with KIT. And our software platform is called Toolkit. All I have to do is just add another T to the end of it, and I nailed it.
And that's it. You got it. Yeah. So let's talk about going public just a little more in detail. What type of energy, money, process do you have to go through to take a company public, even via SPAC? Because apparently via SPAC is like...
Actually, via SPAC's more expensive.
Yes. So let's talk
about that. Much more expensive. It's shorter, but you pay for it because you can get it done pretty quickly. Well, as far as on the personal toll, it nearly killed me. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean, I fly a lot, right? I travel a lot for business. But this is like once, twice a week. You're in New York, London. You're out shopping for investors, trying to develop the pipe, right? The pipe part of it, which backstops the public money that comes out. Going back to bad timing, I had an 18-month-old, coming up. I had an 18-month-old son. Wife's pregnant, right? I mean, I end up having a baby during this process. My 15-year-old, let's just say I feel like I kind of messed up a few things in terms of, I got divorced when she was 5. And when you get divorced, you sort of turn into a grandparent as a dad, just the way that you start seeing them infrequently. And so I have a lot of guilt around that. But I tried to really make up for that in some ways. But when my next 2 kids came, I'm like, I'm not going to screw this up. I'm going to just saturate them with time, be there for them and all their stuff. And then, my son's 2, and I'm already gone every week. He started walking when I wasn't even home. It was just a complete clusterfuck of mental anguish in my head as I'm flying around the world trying to. Just the machinery involved in going public is just something that it will take you months to even understand what you're even involved in. And then the energy level required to push that over the line. I think everyone should find their breaking point in their life once. Find your red line and then never hit it again. I thought I had done that a few years ago. And then through the process of going public via a de-SPAC, I couldn't even see where the red line was. It was so far behind me. And I was just so out beyond it that, and so newborn in the middle of that house nightmare, trying to take a company public. It was too much. It was absolutely too much. And at the same time, trying to still run the company, which a technology development company it can be an animal. And it was killing me. But it's expensive. So the way the process works, right? So a SPAC is a special purpose acquisition corporation. And they rose in popularity 4 or 5 years ago. They've been around forever. This isn't some new thing. But when money's free, when interest rates are 0, and there's so much liquidity floating around trying to find a home, certain investment vehicles or mechanisms start gaining in popularity over the others. And when money was easy to come by, early stage companies could fast track their way to being publicly traded, which has a bunch of advantages, like some of the ones we talked about. So it is desirous for certain corporations to want to be public. Not everyone, but some profiles fit it well. Others don't. And some of them decided to go public
Yeah, via SPAC.
via SPAC because they actually turned it into a money-raising mechanism, not just a mechanism to get put in as a public listing. We're going to go out and raise a ton of money doing this. Well, the SPAC corporations, or rather the public investors in these SPACs, started becoming wise that the incentives were a little aligned wrong, that there's a lot of service-oriented companies that start making a shit ton of money during this process. Banking firms, legal firms.
Right.
And I'm not talking just a little bit of money. I'm talking a lot of money. And so this avenue of cash just starts, it's a river of cash to these organizations that are putting these companies. And just like everything else, when the incentives are just aligned not in the most amazing way, you start overdoing one side over to the other. Now, that doesn't excuse or take away from some of the companies that are really well positioned, have the fundamentals to be a public-facing company, and the need. And ours fits that category. But yeah, it's hard to outrun the SPAC moniker and the SPAC aura. But if you look at the last 3 years of de-SPAC companies versus traditional IPOs, the de-SPAC companies are trading higher. So it just turns out it's a shitty market.
Yeah.
And SPACs, because it was a faddish sort of thing that sort of rose in popularity and then crashed, got all the headlines. But you know how many IPOs happened last year?
Yeah, for sure.
Not too many.
For sure.
I was getting people calling me going, how the hell did you even get a deal done? Because we had a really good deal. There's so many SPACs that liquidated. There's a ton of companies or SPACs that couldn't find targets. There's a bunch of companies trying to go public that actually cratered in the middle of the process. And what helps from us is, our company's backed by actually large public companies. Significant shareholders of mine are large public companies that came in and supported the deal and the transaction in a pretty compelling way. And that's helped tremendously, and it helped garner the investment writ large, and I think gave a lot of confidence to the company that we're creating. But you can't escape the NASDAQ when tech sells off. When tech sells off, I mean, shit, Tesla's down 50%, right? Yeah. Is that all of a sudden a shitty company? You might say it was overvalued, but when you go from 0 to 8% on interest rates, it has some rippling effects. So, timing.
Timing. It's all about the timing.
Timing.
Let's talk about software. We talked about the product. I've seen it. I've watched the videos. It's pretty futuristic. It's like I said, you're building Stark Enterprises for your son, is what you kind of mentioned. Exactly. Right now. You're going to leave him.
Apparently.
With that. Yeah.
Fuck that up.
But to run this on the back end, I mean, you briefly said you need a guy with a joystick, but I'm assuming it's a little more.
That's the old way.
Okay.
We run our robots with a mouse.
Okay, and so proprietary software
we employ more software engineers than we do anything else. Software, data scientists,
and I feel like
developers.
That's a whole separate business.
Oh God, yes. Yeah. So Toolkit, our platform that runs everything, it's licensable on its own.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
makes sense.
So there's thousands of these quote unquote robots in the world today, and I call them quote unquote robots because, like I said, if you saw them, you would think it was just an earth mover machine connected to a huge umbilical running underwater. Ours, in contrast, is a free-swimming, transformable, fully electric robot powered by some of the latest and greatest concepts in AI. Has a very high degree of self-directed and self-sufficient behaviors that we sort of fly around with a mouse like a pilot would an airplane, like a big passenger airplane it flies on autopilot most of the time. You think the pilot's doing anything? These guys fall asleep, And so in a similar capacity, we are able to drive and run our machines with very little human input, as opposed to the machine being run by a joystick that has every input of it put down by an operator, which therefore makes it very expensive because you have a huge staff of people running this thing. So you're right 100% that there is exceptionally sophisticated and complex software principles at play. In fact, it's some of the hardest problems. Like, look at self-driving cars. Let's say I'm going to develop an algorithm to have a self-driving car not hit a cat? Well, I could come up with a training algorithm that scours the internet for contextually labeled images of cats, which are not hard to find. Here's Fluffy chasing the red ball. People name their photos all sorts of crazy shit. And so through brute force learning techniques, these Silicon Valley brute force training techniques, I could train an algorithm in 2 seconds to avoid hitting a cat, load it into my self-driving car, and voila. Because the data that you aggregate these training algorithms on is just so plentiful. How much data do you think is just contextually labeled floating around the internet of the underwater stuff?
Especially deep down.
Not a lot.
Yeah, I would assume so.
So some of the hardest machine learning and artificial intelligence problems that are being worked on today are in the ocean. So we attract some exceptional talent because these are very, very difficult challenges. Solving them, then, it means you've created something of real value. And innovation, right? People throw this word around all the time like it means something. I don't think most people can't even define what the word means. But to me, it means invention plus commercialization. Everybody always forgets the last part. If you want to invent something, stay in school, write an academic paper about it. But to innovate means to actually provide commercial value because you're changing something that's in use. If it's in use, it means people are paying to use it or they're buying something because of it. To innovate means to alter that ecosystem, not just to invent something new and be, we're innovating. Bullshit. You're not innovating. Innovating means altering a completely commerce ecosystem. So ocean innovation, by definition, is something that if you get it right, because of the complexity and the expense, reciprocal to that is the value. And what I love about what we're doing is we're going up against pretty traditional incumbents that are now all of a sudden starting to attach the word robot and robotics to their name.
They're catching up.
They're catching up, right? But even these companies, I don't think, could stomach the real investment required.
Yeah.
Back to risk.
So you mentioned AI within your robots, and of course these things are not attached to you. Very little human input.
Mm-hmm.
What allows this machine to make a decision? Hey, I'm gonna twist this knob. Or, hey, this looks like a bad wire to cut. I'm going to leave it alone. Because that sounds like a big problem.
Yeah.
Especially with, defense, like other things that because you have a lot on the line with one bad decision.
Yeah. So we specialize in a particular branch of this called shared control. Or supervised autonomy. So these are not like sentient machines that just run off and go do things willy-nilly. They're instructed. What they're capable of doing is handling the real-time dynamics of the uncertainty in the environment. So like a painting and welding robot, this beautiful Mercedes here, when it was made, there's a welding robot that just sort of welds a place on the car frame, and it's going to do it no matter whether the car frame's there or not, right? It has no intelligence. It doesn't have any reactive components to stopping or welding over here if the frame was moved slightly. If you take that sort of to its logical conclusion, you and I are extremely adaptive creatures, right? We can respond to stimuli and inputs and change our behaviors. There's a bunch of stuff in the middle. And industrial robots sort of are giving way to this thing called service robots. Getting a pizza delivered from a driving robot out here. It's a big deal. I mean, it's actually a real thing now, right? I mean, Domino's, I think, has a partnership with little track vehicles delivering things. Amazon talks about delivering
via
drones, right? And so there's companies that will deliver you hotel towels to your door. Savoki is a company that is working on developing, bring the vending machine to your hotel door. So there's a whole ecosystem of service robotics. I specialize in one where we're using those service robots for the ocean world. So you're usually in and around an environment that was engineered for us or is exceptionally unstructured. Contrast very much to the factory where everything is structured and put in its place. And so you can sort of automate some things and not worry too much that someone's going to move something around. Well, underwater, you've got sea monsters and aliens, apparently, and fish and sharks and get in the way and completely alter what you might be doing. So couple that to the fact that the currents, 3-knot current comes along, tries to blow your robot off station. Very different than space, I might add, except the alien part. But so all of that complexity, that you're talking some of the most advanced machine learning and AI concepts out there to get that robot to operate on its own for periods of time. So this is back to the supervised autonomy. So we can control, let's say we have a self-driving car. Let's say we control it with a remote. Well, that car is running with RF. We're communicating with that car through the something akin to the speed of light with RF, and then whatever the computational delays. It's almost near real time, right? Underwater, the speed of sound through water is 1,500 meters per second. Which means if I'm going to communicate acoustically, which is the only real way of communicating underwater, like dolphins and whales, we use acoustic modems to communicate with our robots, which means it takes a packet 1 second for every mile the robot is away from you. So now 1 second, 1 second. So you're operating the robot, let's say it's 2 miles underneath you, which is pretty common. 4 seconds plus some computational delay plus back to the remote stage. It might be 6 or 7 seconds before you get an update on what the robot's doing. So it needs to handle a lot on its own. So you give it some instructions. I need you to turn this valve, position 1, 3. You double click on it in the image about what you want it to do. And then 7 seconds later, you might get confirmation on what it's done, right? But in the interim, it's got to be very smart to handle when the sea monster tries to screw it up.
Right.
So that technology is very, very, very challenging to develop.
And is there, are you working on a faster way, or is like, as far as communication, is that part of the problem that is being solved, or is it just being able to do the tasks?
It's why the old way has an umbilical.
Okay.
Right? Just like you're hard-lined down to the robot, because no one had the technology to cut it, because they did not. So acoustic communication has been around for a while, but not in a way where they're transmitting 3D information about the environment, where they're syndicating and exchanging sophisticated commands and information back and forth. Not that at all, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most valuable components of our company is probably our graphical compression technique. So we image the subsea world around us, we put it through a compression algorithm, we send it through an acoustic modem, we reconstruct it at the UI, and the user is able to click on the artifacts in the image that they want to pick up.
Okay. These users are obviously not all in-house, the people controlling the machines.
Mostly, yeah.
They're in-house,
Mm-hmm.
even like. So what I'm trying to get at is,
Defense Department's a little different because the people that run the service are usually wearing camouflage.
Okay.
Right. So those folks are, but let's just stick to the commercial model of the company. We are building a fleet to own and operate. We don't sell these. We sell the service.
Right.
This is a robotics as a service company, which means it takes an enormous initial investment to get the first ones done, get them out into the wild. We operate the service. We could try to sell these, but I don't think it'd be a great business model.
Okay. Because then you'd have to deal with all other sorts of things.
Who would run them?
Right.
Right? So the operators are our staff.
Okay. So all remote, all in-house, these guys are operating these machines. And at how many of these are there going to be? I'm thinking, based on what I'm hearing today, we probably need thousands of these to carry out thousands of tasks in the water.
Yes. So our business plan, let's just say over a 5-year period of time, we think with the right capital, we could build 100.
Okay. And
it's a multi-billion dollar.
Right.
It's a multi-billion dollar company. If we
and
do that.
still the demand is way more than that.
Oh, yeah.
Globally.
No. So let's say if Nauticus was exceptionally successful, we'll build 100. Our competitors, the big companies, take Oceaneering, for example, which I'll loosely classify for this example as a competitor. They have 250 work-class ROVs. Probably in their height, they probably had 350. Like, we're going to build 100. The market leader of this kind of work, especially in drilling support, is Oceaneering, without question. And let's just say on average, their fleet size is about 300. We're going to build a third of that over the next 5 years. That's if we went gangbusters, which we're probably not going to build 100. That's a fraction of the market, right? It's because we've turned our robot that competes against the day rate of a vessel. So our value of our company will be, let's say we build 20, right? In my opinion, it's going to be a story where Tesla has a fraction of the manufacturing capacity of Toyota, but is worth many, many, many times Toyota, right? Because the future value of the company is just tremendous. The stock market is really what the future value is. It's a representation of what people think you're going to be valued in the future, not what you're valued right now. Now, the mark to market, so to speak, that's clipped every day, right? You know, as a private company, you're kind of like, I wonder what my company's worth right now. As a public company, you're told that every freaking second.
Right. It's like, this is what you're worth.
This is what you're worth today. This is what you're worth today. This is what you're worth today.
So speaking about that, what was the valuation when you went public versus today because of the market conditions?
Yeah, not as much. I mean, I think our market cap's probably 200 million.
From 600.
You know, there's some accounting funnies in there.
Okay.
I think that was our initial out. I think we probably went out at 450.
Okay.
Our IPO de-SPAC market cap was probably 450, and yeah, probably 200, probably half.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good.
But that's not too bad based on like what else is going on in the market.
Well, we've converted a lot of our cash into assets, so it's a balance sheet exercise, right? So there's that, and then there's what it trades at. You know, could be worse.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, all right, market's down, timing, you know, for SPACs and the, you know, market in general haven't been like favorable over the past, you know, I would say 40 months.
Yeah. Guess what? It's a great time to buy.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But, you know, based on what I'm hearing, I feel like you have an end goal. It's a number.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
So let's talk about that.
Because
everybody has a number.
Yeah. No, first of all, people are like, oh, wait, I want to be a unicorn. I want $1 billion company. I'm like, I don't want $1 billion company. I want a $10 billion company. Are you kidding me? I 100% have the raw material of creating a $10 billion company. And even that might be selling it short. And then there's personal objectives.
Those are the best.
Those are the best, yeah. I mean, that's why I've aggressively started tech-oriented companies. Listen, I have all the respect in the world for other types of businesses, right? You've been obviously extremely successful, and some of the most, I think, wealthiest people around have large real estate holdings.
Sure,
but the tippity tip is not even close, right? Everybody in the top echelon is in tech, and so I view that model, and I go, okay, if I'm going to make a dent in Nick's net wealth category, you can springboard quickly in tech, but you know it's only one or the other, right? It's either like this is either going to be incredibly wildly successful, or it is going to just be a disaster.
It goes back to risk.
It goes back to risk, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's trending towards the former, right? It looks pretty good. Where we're heading. Is there going to be challenges? For sure, but those are just problems to be solved. Right? The fundamentals are what we should be worried about. We got that part right. Right product, right market, right time. There's so much emphasis on the ocean right now. It's crazy. So I love our chances. And, you know, I don't want to talk about a number specifically, but I have ambitions. I need to get my little Tony, you know, a good start.
Well equipped.
I want him to be very well equipped. So when he does the Mark III, suit, maybe he can do 2 of them instead of 1.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Uh, let's talk about battery technology a little bit. Because, I mean, I know you briefly mentioned the electric motors. Obviously, these machines that you build are unmanned, meaning they require,
They have a battery. They have a battery about the size of a Model S battery. So a Tesla Model S, about a 100 kilowatt hour battery. Aquanaut has a 100 kilowatt hour battery in it. It's the biggest battery for this class of machine in the ocean.
And how long does that put this machine in function? Or have you ever had one that just sunk because the battery died? Or
So I got a call. This is a couple months ago. It's like, I don't know, at night, I get a call. We might have lost one of these things. It's like, what the fuck? And we got it back.
okay, all right. Well, I guess that's what we need to know. Do you name them?
You know what? You're the second person in as many weeks that have been like, so yes, the Aquanaut is the brand name.
Right, but do you name them individually?
Exactly. Not yet, but apparently we're going to start because
I think
if you're the weather vane of excellent branding, which you clearly are, we need to start naming them.
Yeah, I think not only do you name them, you actually like measure their performance, put some KPIs in there. Yeah, that would
You're fired.
That would be so cool. To like every day track your machines and
exactly.
what their success rates and
so we talked about naming like
and Jimmy's getting old or whatever.
What's wrong with Jimmy today? Jesus, Jimmy's like not keeping up. We need to.
Yeah, I think that'd be a cool idea.
We're going to. We're for sure going to. I thought about naming them, when this topic came up, our marketing graphics person, he's like, what are we naming them? I'm like, what are we naming them? What are you talking about? It's Aquanaut Serial 1, Aquanaut number 2, Aquanaut number 3. He's like, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's boring.
It's boring, exactly. And he's thinking, we can name them like either islands, like, Galveston all the way to whatever. And I was like, so once the concept came up, I'm like, okay, we'll come up with the right name. I don't know if it'll be Bobo, but it'll be, it needs to be something.
Yeah.
Because, again, you're the second person in a week.
I'd look at fighter pilot names. I feel like those would be the most like suiting for something like this,
Like Bob?
Like whatever they are, the common, whatever, I guess you'd have to do a little bit of due diligence to see what the top 10
they got some
fighter
pretty
pilot
good. They
names
got
are.
some pretty good ones. Yeah.
Or maybe fighter pilot code names, like Maverick or,
Yeah, exactly.
or whatever,
We named, so on Jacoby, we named all the motors. And we named them after Top Gun.
Yeah.
There was Maverick, there was Goose.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
The Goose one didn't work very well either. We had to throw it away. And we did that. It's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
I need to do it.
Especially in your like, if you have footage or of them operating underneath, if they had a badge with like a name on, that would be hilarious. You know what I mean?
That is a good idea. People have thought about painting like those old World War II bomber mosaics on the nose. We thought about doing that. But yeah, we're building a fleet. I mean, this is. I get as inspired by this as say early aviation in the 20s. Right. We're just starting.
It's just the very beginning.
5% of the world's oceans have been explored on any level whatsoever. We don't know what's down there. We barely know anything about it. That's just sounds amazing to me. Amazing to me.
Look, the fact that we see footage of newly found like species of like things that live under there in 2022, 2023 is just fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like what you never knew this was there prior to like. We feel like we're so far ahead. And like you said, it's like we know more about space than we do about the ocean.
Yeah, we do. And it's funded multiples more in space. And again, I'm not going to get on my soapbox. NASA's an amazing agency. I loved my time there. All I'm saying is that maybe there's a few problems we should just think of a little bit. It's not saying shut it down. It's not saying we shouldn't be doing it. I'm saying the ocean space is also important. And maybe we can take some of that public investment from the spaceflight community and better commercialize it into the ocean world.
I almost feel like that investment is happening by force because if they don't do it, someone else will, and they're just trying to keep up.
Well, the Chinese kick our ass when it comes to this topic. That's public.
Okay.
That's understood. Um, their arsenals is pretty advanced.
And so you would say if we backed off a little bit, it wouldn't like really change much.
No, we should not back off. I mean, listen, you can read the stuff online. That it's But I mean, the U.S. needs to ensure that it has that it. We got surprised by the reason the history of DARPA, right? The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's the U.S.'s sort of research arm of the DoD. Part of its creation was not being surprised by an asymmetric military advantage. Launching a satellite in space was sort of an asymmetric military advantage. When the Russians when the Soviets rather put Sputnik up, caught us off guard, and the U.S. started putting measures in place that we wouldn't be caught off guard. And pretty much every major technological leap that you and I get to enjoy every single day can find its originations at DARPA.
Yeah.
And so you would expect that they would keep the pulse on what's cool and what's not cool in all sorts of domains. And I would think they probably understand the ocean domain pretty well.
Yeah. So let's go to the 7-year jumps and changes. And look, you're having too much fun in your life right now, even though, of course, it's difficult and there's challenges and all of that. What are the next 7 years looking like?
So I have some objectives by 50. I'm 45, which is crazy to just say out loud. And then even saying 50 just sounds nuts.
Yeah.
To even think about being 50 years old. But I've got some numbers that I feel both on net wealth and liquidity that will complete the objectives for the next 20 years after that. And I had when I turned 40, I put a plan in place. Actually executed that pretty well. Market's down, so maybe gonna need some partial credit on this test.
Yeah.
But my family is just such a big deal to me. Like everyone has some universal truths in the world, right? When it comes to the family, it's just I want to position my life to just extract the most joy and fulfillment and infuse into my kids an attitude of that's so careful. Just the ingenuity, do anything, the respect and appreciation, which is going to be very difficult to do. I'm just thinking about the way my kids potentially could grow up versus how my daughter grew up. But I mean, my daughter who's 15, I got pictures of her in her very first office, and she's acting like she's on the phone at a desk playing an engineer, and she's 6, right? And I think all of those beginnings has given her such a different view of what she can do, what she can put together. She wants to be a pilot, by the way. She wants to go to the Air Force. And one of the reasons I started flying was to show her it's possible.
Right.
And I took her up with me a couple weeks ago, and she was just, grinning from ear to ear, just filming in the back of the little Piper Archer. But what I said earlier is I've built a company, but I haven't built a business. So the next 5 years of my life will be growing the biggest business that I can, and doing the most with it, whether that's on the mission side, on the outreach side. I'm a big fan of outreach. I was inspired by people that got to me and I was just mentored, right? I think you and I have a responsibility to demonstrate to the people that are up and coming how to better the world. I mean, I really do. And, or we don't have any hope, you know, that we've got to illustrate to people the right character and what really you can accomplish as a human being. And it's not for everybody. The world wouldn't work if we didn't have people that didn't want to go do what they want to. Well, this can be destructive too, right? I mean, sometimes I appreciate some of my employees that are very strict with their schedule. The 5 o'clock hits, they're out the door. They're out the door because they're going to go home to their families, and they're very comfortable with that. And I have a ton of respect for that. You know, they're probably happier than I am. You know.
Yeah, but they're not founders.
Well, I also have and again, this is true for a lot of people, and especially you and our breed, is that I can suffer some short-term pain, and I can invest in this period, and then understand the dividends it will pay later.
Right.
And I can sustain that for a very long time.
Yeah. I think this is something that maybe a lot of people don't realize, is that money may solve problems, but it doesn't solve the problems that you want to solve.
Yeah.
It solves its own problems.
Yes.
And you're just a bypass mechanism to kind of put it where it belongs.
Yeah.
And this is just going back to talking about our breed.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I think both for you and I, you know, starting businesses and running different businesses, ultimately, it's not what we take home. It's just what we can solve that day. And if we walk out of the office solved, you know, a bunch of problems with a little bit of money, that's fine. We come back again tomorrow to fight.
I have been I'm intoxicated by trying to do something that's never been done in the world, right? And you know, maybe I'll go overstretch a little bit, but I really, it just fuels me to go. That's a first. That would be a world first. That's never been done before, and that fuels me. And if I'm successful at that, there'll be a lot of outcrop that could be financially positive.
Yeah.
And then once you start seeing your weather veining in the right direction, okay, how do I then utilize those assets to parlay that into something even bigger, right? So like in my second funding round, I was already thinking about, okay, let's start another company, right? I don't want to keep this here. It will never grow properly here. Let's split the nucleus and start another company. And now they've got independence. You know, now you're creating two things, right? If I had kept that IP at my first company, it'd been shuttered. Yeah. It had been shelved, shuttered. We didn't have time for it, etc. Right? And then
you found the solution, and then you created the company.
Yeah, I mean,
and look, that's I guess a lot of people. Not I guess, I take that back. A lot of people actually find businesses that way.
Yeah, they do.
They find the solution, and they're like, oh, this could use a company, and this is a business, so let me just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I caution every PhD scientist out there that their dissertation is not going to be a business. But it is helpful to have a good idea. But I have also learned that the idea is just the spark, that you got to add the fuel, you got to add the oxygen, and you got to keep the flame going, because
that's the hardest part. By the way,
it's
to
all
keep
of
the
it.
flame going.
It's all of it.
That's hard.
It's all of it.
Yeah.
Right. And the people that can keep the flame, they're the ones that ultimately went out and succeed. And I tell people, like, and I do some mentorship and I do some talks and stuff. And I just see people give up, like people can give up too easily, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like to really do something of value. Do you understand, like, the struggle that you're just set to do? Like, it's part and parcel with the whole concept. Unless you win the lottery, acquiring the kind of net wealth that you and I want to compound isn't something that just comes easy or an overnight. It takes persistent work. And there's so many parts of your life that you understand that in. Weight training, practicing the piano, whatever. We all understand this methodical practice that it takes to hone and become the best of something. But then some, but being an entrepreneur, so many people just think it's just supposed to be this little net. No, you train at it. You actually read, you train, you study what other concepts work, you put those into practice. This is something that's continuously refined. You just don't happen upon it. And I think there's a whole set of people that don't understand that this is something you have to practice.
So I know we're running a little long on time, but I do have two questions that I wanna discuss, maybe in a little more depth. First question is family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what happens, or what type of a person does it take to deal with someone like you? Because I'm
It's a great question.
yeah, because look,
Should get my wife here.
I'm just I'm looking back at my family, my wife, and it really takes a special type of person to put up with me. And so I'm wondering now, since we're the same breed, what is that for you?
Well, it takes one to know one. So my wife, who's also a very successful entrepreneur, runs her own brokerage and commercial development firm, gets it and has been really good at playing the long game. But it's not that it's easy. She just gets it. And I mean, I'm a very difficult person to get along with because I have high standards. That can be fun though too, right? So, Scorpio. So, to every extent you could completely think of. I'm a very passionate individual. I love to have a lot of fun. And I work really hard. I expect a lot of myself, but I also expect a lot of other people. And I want a lot for other people. And like one of my goals, I've told a lot of people this. One of my goals was to make 20 millionaires at our company. I got damn close. Damn close. And I was actually advised by some of our bankers when they were starting the deal. They're like, "You've given a lot of the company to the staff." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. That's the whole point. Why do you think they're doing what the hell they're doing? Right? These people aren't working for salaries." So my wife similarly understands that we're building the equity of our family. And so she's the strongest person I've ever met in my life. Some people are like, "Oh, that's the strongest woman I know." She's the strongest person I've ever met in my life. She puts me to shame in just how she can be focused on something and how she can just lay it all out, lay it flat, go from there to there, get it.
Does she help you make business decisions?
Oh God, yes.
Your business decisions?
Well, Nauticus is a different animal, right? But we have Rad Capital is it's pretty successful in its own right. We don't talking about it, but I've got two stages, right? I got the thing I'm creating the net wealth from, and then I've got the thing that provides a lot of cash flow. And I think it's really important to have both those that you're trying to figure out. And she's been very helpful in understanding people and I remember when we were first dating, I was just struck. So she was becoming a partner in her firm at the time. She's since left and started her own company, but she became a partner in her firm, and I was listening to her. She had a client call her, and she's just like, no, that's not going to work. This is the way this is going to go down, and you have to accept this and that. And I was just like, holy shit. I'd never heard someone talk in this sort of affirmative, imperative, just fucking deal making, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, this woman is fucking amazing, And I was just inspired in that moment. And I mean, it's almost, she's very direct. So she's Eastern European, right? So she's just like, just straight to the point,
Yeah,
right?
like Middle Eastern women.
Oh yeah, and I've had to soften her up around the edges a little bit, be like, "Hey, baby, I think you can get more out of this if you don't piss them off too much, And but as a consequence, although in her business life, people love doing business with her because she's just so direct. Just bottom line, direct. This is what we're going to do. We're going to get this done. This is how we're going to do it. This is how much it's going to cost you. Oh, by the way, you can't pay this much for it, and don't come back with me and offer and lowball me because I ain't going to do the deal. I was like, wow. I'm learning a lot here, right? And so, but we have a tough household. I mean, the only reason I'm here is because she put our company on hold for 2 years, right? She kept it going in the background, but it didn't grow near what she wanted to. And oh, by the way, was nearly raising our kids. Oh, and her parents are here from Belarus, and we don't live with them anymore, but we did at the time because of a bunch of things going on, right? I mean, there's a little conflict occurring in the world right now, and the only reason I survived any of it is because she's 10 times stronger than I am.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
No, she's, I mean, it's just the best thing that ever happened to me.
That's awesome. Last question. And this one's more on leadership. And I guess where I'm going with this is, do you feel that in order to hype your team or to have them be energized at the level that you want them to be, that your energy also needs to be elevated?
Oh God, yes.
So if you expect them to operate at like 100%, you need to be at 150%.
Oh God, yes. I mean, universally. I tell people, like, I'm a motivation bank, and they come in with their little ATM cards and they swipe from it every day. And I've realized this, and they know it when I'm having a bad day, because the whole mood of the company is different, because it just filters down. And I've really started studying this effect. And so me continuously cheerleading and keeping a positive image has tremendous, probably market cap to the effects on the company. And it's very easy to want to descend into griping and complaining, and humans relate almost through complaining. It's like how we tell stories. And it doesn't do anybody any good. I can tell you 100%, it doesn't do anybody any good. It will not make you any money. It might feel good for 5 minutes to vent and can have some cathartic exchange. It will never make you any money. Avoid it like the plague. You have got to maintain and be a positive force. You will do more by elevating the mood of your company and the spirit of your employees than you ever will by complaining about anything. And so, yes, as far as a leader goes. Now, that doesn't mean not address things that are hard, and it doesn't mean not deal with your lieutenants, your immediate lieutenants, and be firm and say hard things with them. But there's a really good way to do that. I mean, there's a professional leadership style way to do that. But as far as the subordinates, the several ranks down in your company, that needs to be very positive. I had an all hands a couple of months ago, and I was just, I was unhappy with how certain things were happening, and I was very expressive. I had so many people come back to me like, it's too negative. Like it's not going to have the effect you thought. And to me, I was like so justified, because I make mistakes all the time. I just want to slap their ass and, smack their hands and rub their nose in it, how bad we'd fucked up, and be like, we got to do better. And I did a little of the rah, we got to do better, but a little too much of the, what the fuck were you guys thinking type shit. And I'd probably change that if I could do it again. And it needs to be much more, you have to be honest, but man, there's an angle you can bring that from, and positive. It's so much more beneficial, no matter how hard it is to draw that up from inside you.
Yeah, I think as a founder, you just get passionate sometimes, and
you do.
And at that point, I don't care what people say. You need to let certain emotions out, and sometimes it may not come out in the right way.
Yeah, I've made mistakes. I'm saying I'm grading myself, and the advice I would give you and my future self tomorrow is don't succumb to that. Don't succumb to the ease of it's very easy to just let that part go. Back to practicing, right? Really easy just to eat birthday cake all day, when in fact you should be eating healthy. Practice eating healthy at work. Practice not eating too much birthday cake with the staff.
Yep, I'll take that. I'll take that advice.
Unless it's real birthday cake.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Look,
Hamza, this was awesome.
this was awesome, man. I had a
This
great
was so
time.
much fun.
This was so much fun. I think this is the most that we've ever talked, and it's weird because we talk, face to face, and yeah, we talk enough, and here we are chatting about like everything.
Everything.
But look, it was great having you here. I'm really proud of you, and
Thank you.
really, I do think you are going to be Iron Man.
Thank you.
Or your son now is going to be
my
Iron
son.
Man. So I'm 100% confident that you can accomplish everything and even more, just because of the cool person and your nature, and
That means so much.
and of course, the group that we're in, everybody is just crazy just the stories that you hear.
Oh, it's insane.
Especially for someone like me who hopped off a plane, came to this country, and then got to be part of this crazy group. The first time I actually applied to be part of the group, I didn't make it.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't make it. My net worth wasn't like
Quite there.
I tried, but it didn't work.
You've since
Yeah.
destroyed that number.
So, anyways, it was just it's a life-changing experience, and the
Mm-hmm.
relationships are just life-changing as
Oh,
well.
they are. Not to keep going on this, but I was really another networking group. Holy cow, this one's got a hell of a yearly fee.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember one of the meetings that I was attending, one of our friends, I won't give his last name, but Ash, was like, it's the cheapest thing you'll ever pay. I'm like, what are you talking about? Who is this guy? He's like, if you're not learning, compounding that, and seeing tenfold returns at least, then you're just not doing it right.
Yeah, that's on you then.
It's on you.
All right.
And holy cow, was he so right?
He is.
He was he nailed it exactly. It's one of the best group of people I've ever seen in my life. They're all inspiring. All of them.
All right. I've taken a year off.
So I was gonna ask you.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but in 2019, I exited my portfolio to a person that I then
I know. Yeah,
brought into the
Jack.
group. Yeah. So I exited my portfolio, and then I had an exit outside of my portfolio, went back into business, but this time went back really into like running my business again. And I had sworn I would never gonna do that, but such is life, I guess.
But you've also this is become front and center in your life right now.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a bunch of things. I have about 6 different initiatives that I'm running together, and all of them are in startup mode. Like literally, it's startup mode, right?
Oh, and so talk about time.
Yeah.
You know how hard it is to show up once a month to this thing?
Yeah.
That's like, in fact, I didn't go. I haven't gone twice this year.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, guys,
So number one, I couldn't go. So last year I attended 1 meeting out of 12.
Gosh.
And this year I literally have no time. Also, I just need to be focused on like what I'm doing. And so I had to call Rick, and I was like, hey, look, man, this year is not next year I'm back, because it's going to be a little easier, and I'll have all the right people in the right place. And hopefully by then I'm ready to go. But this year is just super difficult.
That's so responsible though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard saying no to stuff, but I mean, that's some conviction, and good on you.
Yeah. And
That's
so,
awesome.
really just focusing on running the businesses. Once they're all settled, then we're good. Then I'm on autopilot. But until then, I need to be front and center.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.